Before we begin, I want to offer a clear and firm warning. What you are about to hear contains graphic descriptions of violence, coercion, and abuse as detailed in open court during the federal trial of Sean Diddy Combs. These are not dramatizations, but actual testimony given under oath. Stories that may be deeply unsettling or triggering to some, especially to survivors of trauma or abuse. This content is intended for mature audiences only. Listener discretion is strongly advised. And remember, all individuals mentioned in this video, including Mr. Combs, are presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. If you're joining us for the first time, full summaries for days 1 through 7 are available on the video tab of this channel. What follows is day number 8. Now let's begin. The air in the federal courtroom was heavy on day 8. A gray late May morning lit by harsh fluorescent lights and shadowed faces. Sean Diddy Combs sat at the defense table in a crisp navy suit, elbows resting on the polished wood, flanked by his lawyers. Across from him, the prosecutors piled notebooks and exhibits by the lectern. Judge Arun Subramanian watched from his bench, salt and pepper hair cropped short, glasses perched on his nose, enforcing order with a steely gaze. Reporters and gallery observers watched in rapt silence as the next chapter of this twisted sex trafficking and racketeering saga unfolded. Outside, the city's rumble felt distant. Inside, every whispered word seemed to echo with portent. On the stand first was Special Agent Jared Gannon of Homeland Security, a veteran federal officer in a dark suit and plain tie. His demeanor was calm, almost clinical, as he guided the jury through the harrowing details of the March 2024 raid on Combs' palatial Miami Star Island mansion. He described it with the precision of a detective recounting a case file. A 20,000 square foot estate stormed by 80 to 90 agents, boats patrolling the water, an armored truck crashing open the wrought iron gate. Gannon noted they deliberately waited until Combs and his family boarded a flight out of town. "We thought it was best," he said quietly, "to avoid any bloody confrontation." Gannon then methodically cataloged the evidence found in the ransacked bedroom closets. Jurors leaned forward when he described the grisly finds: pieces of 2 disassembled AR-15 rifles, .45 caliber ammo magazines, one holding 19 rounds, another 10, and the telltale red dot sight plates for rifle scopes. He explained that many of the guns had their serial numbers filed off, a common tactic when you want to prevent law enforcement from tracing the weapon. Yet he shrugged off defense suggestions that the taped inert firearms were harmless, noting that even a gun wrapped in duct tape can still be traced by fingerprints or DNA. Then came the items that drew stunned looks in the room. Gannon pointed to photographs shown to jurors of a closet shelf laden not just with weapons but with sex party prop. 25 almost identical bottles of baby oil, at least 30 bottles of Astroglide lubricant, and even rubber ducks. In one exhibit, a column of white rubber ducks floated among dozens of lube bottles, as if some surreal bath ritual. He reported other perverse discoveries: a Gucci handbag pocketed with a white powder positive for cocaine and ketamine, little baggies stamped with a Tesla logo turning out to be MDMA and Xanax pills, a wooden box labeled Puffy filled with psilocybin mushrooms, and in a red suitcase at the guest house entrance, a locked .45 handgun. During this raid, in plain sight, we found evidence of, shall we say, some very unusual hobbies, Gannon said, his tone even but eyes hard. The defense tried to minimize it. Combs' attorney, Tenny Geragos, leaned forward with a sardonic edge. "So, Mr. Gannon, HSI decided to come in by land and by sea with armored vehicles and boats? Overkill?" Gannon replied quietly that it was standard practice to smash gates with an armored vehicle for security. Geragos pointed out that many of the firearms were inert, taped, unloaded, but Gannon insisted that even so, such weapons are dangerous and traceable. At one point, Gannon even held up a pair of red stilettos, asking jurors to note the platform heels, the same kind prosecutors allege were worn during the graphic sex parties at issue. Courtroom sketch artists later noted Combs watching those shoes like a hawk, his expression unreadable. Once Gannon stepped down, the afternoon sun had slipped lower, casting long shadows. The next witness was Dr. Dawn Hughes, a well-known forensic psychologist from Illinois, quiet and self-possessed in a gray pantsuit. She swept into the courtroom confidently, a tall black woman with her hair neatly pulled back, carrying a thin folder of notes. Hughes is something of a celebrity witness, having advised juries in high-profile cases, R. Kelly, but here she was blind, she emphasized. She'd never met Cassie Ventura or spoken with any victim in this case. She was simply there to educate the jury about how trauma and abuse work. In very general terms, Combs's attorneys were quick to note she hadn't treated any of the alleged victims personally and would testify at $600 an hour. Whatever the cynics thought, the prosecution hoped her expert voice could help jurors understand why Cassie and others might have stayed silent for so long. Hughes began by stating overarching truths in measured tones. Victims of domestic and sexual violence often don't flee or report right away. It's about the power and control the abuser has over the victim, she said. She laid out the familiar cycle. At first, a victim might endure months, even years of repeated abuse, feeling trapped by fear and by pockets that are empty if they try to escape. If you don't have money, you are left with a feeling of where am I going to go? She asked rhetorically, pausing as jurors scribbled notes. Cassie Ventura, after all, was pregnant in court just last week and had been financially dependent on Combs, Hughes pointed out. Then Hughes spoke of emotional bonds, of the seductive ebbs of an abusive relationship. The phrase trauma bond came out early, the idea that even a brutal partner can show moments of kindness, and in the victim's mind, the good version of the person can still exist. Victims often feel a tremendous amount of shame, humiliation, degradation, she testified, eyeing the jury, and they don't want to talk about it. They don't even want to think about it in their own brain, she added, quoting the same experts she'd tell jurors. It was academic but sympathetic, the kind of language the defense would later attack as abstract and not tailored to the Combs case. On cross-examination, Garagos was circumspect but pointed. He asked Hughes to imagine all the chaos described by Cassie and others in this trial, but to view it dispassionately. Were all battered women sex trafficking victims, he suggested, or could some be simply in a violent relationship? Hughes held her ground. The pattern she described fit many scenarios of domestic abuse, regardless of the particulars here. This case isn't complicated, Garagos reminded the jury, echoing his summary argument, trying to paint all of this as mere love, jealousy, infidelity, and money. There were a few tense moments as he pressed her, and observers later noted a quiet tug-of-war flicker between the defense attorney and the composed psychologist. But Hughes's testimony went the distance. When she spoke of delayed disclosure or of the terrible embarrassment that stops victims from speaking up, even Garagos remained in his seat and nodded along. By late afternoon, it was time for the day's final witness, George Kaplan, Combs's on-again, off-again personal assistant from 2007 through 2009. Kaplan is a slight, tired-looking man with short sandy hair and a dark beard, and he appeared from a distance meek until he opened his mouth. He said he once worked 80 to 100 hours a week for Combs. He normally wore plain clothes in testimony. Today he was in jeans and a flannel, rubbing his fingers nervously when not gesturing to recall details. Kaplan described a bizarre, humiliating routine. When Combs traveled, he would send Kaplan into the hotel suite afterward like a forensic cleaner. He had to retrieve every used Gatorade bottle, every empty liquor can, and, most damningly, the bottles of lubricant and globs of baby oil left behind. He told me it was to protect Mr. Combs, Kaplan said. The idea was that if the room looked spotless, the hotel wouldn't capture the evidence of what had happened and sell it to the tabloids. Cassie's first lawyer has publicly warned of exactly this. A Spanish news outlet once tried to auction video of her beating. Little by little, Kaplan's story lined up with Cassie's terrifying account. He too had seen Combs leave behind a trail of cables and props. He even attested that he was once sharply scolded for the tiniest infraction, buying 2 half-gallons of bottled water instead of the one Combs had demanded. He berated me for that, Kaplan said quietly, voice strained. It illustrated Combs' ruthless micromanaging, how petty an offense was still worthy of berating someone. But Kaplan's most explosive tales were of the march of freak-offs themselves. He testified that before such parties, Combs would instruct him to prepare the room with very specific supplies. Little boxes of pills, Kaplan saw ecstasy tablets shaped like Barack Obama's face, bottles of expensive lubricant, even sex toys. Then afterward, Kaplan would clean it all up as if nothing had happened. He said Combs often demanded particular drugs and threatened to fire Kaplan if things weren't just right. Kaplan acknowledged he got paid handsomely, but that it didn't make the secrets easier to bear. Under cross, he was defensive but resolute, making clear he only sold his testimony because he believed what happened was wrong. And yes, he admitted lawyers paid him a fee. Across the weeks, a clear narrative mosaic has emerged, and Kaplan fit like another puzzle piece. Cassie Ventura spent 4 days describing how her long-term boyfriend would summon prostitutes to a hotel suite and force her into hours of drugged-up sex while filming them. Freak-offs, she called them, accusing her of cheating and threatening to release tapes if she didn't comply. Now Kaplan said he was the one who scrubbed the scene clean afterward. Combs' former assistant David James had already told jurors he once walked into a Nevada hotel room and found Cassie unconscious on the bed and a naked male escort scurrying out the door. And Sherry Hayes, an exotic dancer known as the Punisher, is on tape detailing his first freak-off encounter with Combs and Cassie in a Trump Tower suite, watching Combs hand out wads of cash and bowls of warm baby oil. Together, their stories overlay. The same baby oil, the same midnight setups, the same fast cash. Of course, the defense paints a very different picture. Garagos reminded the jurors that Combs has never been convicted of a single crime before, and that consenting adults can do what they want in private. Sean Combs is a complicated man, Garagos told the jury early in trial, but this is not a complicated case. He insisted Cassie and the other witnesses came forward solely for money, recounting how Cassie once allegedly demanded $30 million in a lawsuit, and another accuser later sought $22 million. He was calm and measured even when presenting these salacious details, as if reciting an absurdity he hoped the jury would dismiss with a shake of the head. He argued that yes, Combs might once have been a jerk who fought with Cassie, but he's not charged with being a jerk, he reminded everyone. Still, after hearing Day 8's testimonies, many of the prosecution's earlier statements seem reinforced. Gannon's Closet of Deeds echoed Cassie's words about weapons and guns Combs often carried. Hughes' expert lecture on power and control and victims' shame felt like it was written for someone just like Cassie. And indeed, Combs' attorney tried to blunt it, asking whether all battered spouses were sex trafficking victims. And Kaplan's testimony almost exactly matched the prosecution's case theory that Combs had built a small cartel of loyal lieutenants, like Kaplan himself, to arrange, supervise, and clean up these secret parties. One clear tension in the courtroom was a difference between the clinical and the personal. Hughes' calm, detached explanations of trauma left some jurors nodding in understanding, but Combs' lawyers repeatedly tried to paint them as amorphous psychological theory not tied to any hard fact. Meanwhile, when the live human stories came, Cassie's tearful recounting of shattering abuse, Sheree's matter-of-fact descriptions of sex acts, and Kaplan's litany of special errands, the defense urged the jury to see them as either ordinary, if shocking, bedroom dramas or outright fabrications. It has become a battle of context. Is Combs a mastermind orchestrating a sex cult, or just a ruthless, disturbed boyfriend? The truth likely lies somewhere in the overlap, but it is up to the jury to decide which parts to believe. Outside the courtroom, commentary is already boiling. Legal analysts interviewed on TV note that the government still has work to do on proving the RICO parts of the case. They must show Combs led a conspiracy, not just that he was a violent partner. One professor quipped that the prosecution must connect the dots between the lovers and the hustlers, something easier said than done with memories and witnesses. Others point out that celebrity trials always come with hype. One late-night host joked, "Is this the Real Housewives of Rikers Island?" While columnists wonder if justice will be served or lost in the glamour. Social media is a storm of hot takes. Hashtags range from Believe Cassie and sex trafficking trial to proof or tabloid as public sentiment splits along familiar fault lines. Some activists say this is a watershed moment for survivors of abuse. This shows even rappers can be held accountable, one tweeted. Others cry foul at what they see as a trial by sensationalism. Why are we treating a private affair like federal crime? A gossip blogger huffed. Late yesterday, a celebrity magazine ran a feature headline, Freakoff's baby oil and the Cassie tape, the shocking allegations behind Diddy's trial, capturing the lurid tone the tabloids have latched onto, yet more serious outlets caution that the jury must ignore the flash and focus on the law. The Washington Post's live updates even remind readers that Judge Subramanian has warned attorneys to avoid a case built on gossip, urging them to stick to witnesses' first-hand experiences. Through it all, the real world spins on. With Day 8's testimony complete, all eyes in the public and press now turn to the next big moment. The expected arrival of Cassie's one-time boyfriend, rapper Kid Cudi. The anticipation is palpable, and tabloids already speculate on what he might say. If he confirms Cassie's version of those events, it would crack the case wide open. In the final moments of Court Day 8, as Combs gathered his notes and rose from the dock, a few murmurs escaped from the press bench. His people not here yet, noted one reporter, eyeing Combs' absent family support. His wife and mother have been conspicuously around some days and not others. Outside, the sidewalk remained crowded with onlookers, some wearing Justice for Cassie badges, others simply buzzing about the spectacle of it all. Talk about Cudi's role is everywhere. Meanwhile, law Twitter debates whether the defense can sway the jury on RICO elements, and conservative radio shows complain the trial is just celebrity playing the victim. Whatever the public chatter, inside that courtroom, the mood stayed tense and somber. The relentless evidence, high heels and guns, psychological theory, and personal testimony has formed a mosaic whose picture remains unsettling and incomplete. Combs' face was inscrutable, but his sons at the defense table tapped their fists to their chests in a show of support. Cassie's relatives sat in back, eyes red but resolute. The jury, a mix of New Yorkers and others, jotted notes in silence. When the judge finally adjourned, there was a noticeable exhale, as if everyone was holding their breath for the entire day. Outside, cameras flashed and the NYPD debriefed the small crowd. Some reporters headed to nearby media studios for the night's election polling slate to spin the day's events for their 10 p.m. segments. Day 8 may have closed, but the story is far from over. The public debate rages on in commentaries and cable panels. Some say Combs' fate is sealed by now. Others say reasonable doubt still looms. What's certain is that the scene has outgrown this one courtroom. Newspapers are already buzzing about Puffy the Puppet Master versus Puffy the Persecuted. Columnists draw parallels to bygone celebrity trials. Talk show hosts feast on the melodrama.